Joe Rogan is now jumping in again to criticize Trump. I do want to, this won't just be a generic, oh, look, he said something about Epstein and Trump and how it feels like it's a broken promise. I have a different thought I want to share. And then I will show you, is interesting, James Talarico, who's a Texas member of the legislature and a really outspoken voice here in Texas, was the one on this podcast with him. So we'll go through some of those other moments that I thought were interesting as well. And hey, to Rogan's credit, he's finally started bringing more non-right-wing voices onto his show again. I think that will make a difference, and we've been following that vibe shift, and this will help with it with some of these big prominent podcasters. But first, he's adding his voice to the chorus now of former Trump backers, even current Trump backers, who are very concerned with Trump's broken promises.
You know, like the people that were very hopeful for change when Trump got into office, one of the things that everyone was promised was you're going to find out the Epstein client list, and you're going to find out who killed JFK and what the UFOs are all about. You haven't heard a fucking peep out of any of that shit.
Yeah.
No one knows nothing. And today, they just finally said there's no client list, there's no videos. I mean, I had Kash Patel. These people, Kash came on the podcast and said there's nothing that you want to see. You know, this guy...
nothing you need to see.
Dan Bongino, who's always like shouting from the rooftops, we're going to get to the bottom of this and find out who these people are. Everyone's saying, no, Epstein killed himself. No, nothing to see here. And it's like, okay, well, that's why people are cynical. People are cynical because you had all this hope for change, and then you realize, like, oh, the same people that are pulling the strings are still pulling the strings.
You know what this made me think of? Imagine that your significant other hangs around some really bad guys, okay? And they take him out, and he gets a little too handsy with the stripper, and he does drugs, and you're like, stop it, baby, please. Those friends, they're not good influences. Those friends, they get you to do bad things. Stop, you're a good person. And he goes, I know, I'm good, don't worry. I'm going to tell them off, and I'm going to be a better guy. And then he goes out again with them, and now he's up on the stage with the strippers, and he's screaming, much like Pete Hegseth, about all these groups that he hates. He's being dragged out drunk, and he's saying racial epithets. Now I'm just telling a Hegseth story. And you go, babe, Pete, Hegseth, why are you doing that? Your friends are so bad. And I know you're better, and that's why I love you, is because you're gonna change them, and you're gonna change things in the community. And then your honey goes out again, and now they are the stripper, and they're cheating on you, and they're, assaulting people, and you're like, I just am sad because your friends are so bad still. And it's like, at some point, it's your significant other's fault, right? At some point, it is their fault. What's so annoying with how they talk about Trump is even Rogan there, where I'm crediting him that he's saying, it just feels like Trump's letting us down. But there's still, the last line was, it feels like the same people who have been pulling the strings are pulling the strings. What if Trump's the one with the strings? He kind of is the president, and he made quite the deal of ripping apart the government to make sure none of those terrible libs were in there. We out, you in. So can we just say it feels like Trump is doing stuff terribly? It feels like Trump is failing us? I know in MAGA world, this is as critical as it gets, so I appreciate that. But they can't let go of that. It's the people around him. Or it's the string pullers, which connects to bigger conspiracies. Really? The guy who you said the deep state was constantly trying to murder and malign? You're saying now he submitted to the deep state? How does that even fit in your conspiracy? What if he's just bad and he's not as good as you thought? All right, then James Talarico jumps in and explains a really damaging phenomenon here in Texas, which is you have these Texas billionaires, Tim Dunn and brothers Ferris and Dan Wilkes, Dunn and Wilkes, and they are pushing to really destroy public education in Texas. You can take that down, Cole. And I'll show you James bringing this up. and just laying out what this means.
So
my point was that Dunn and Wilkes and I probably become the most outspoken critic of these guys, because I do think people need to know their names, right? You open up your social media feed, you listen to the news, and you hear about Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, or even James Talarico, but you don't actually hear about the two guys who run the whole thing. So, but my point is that they spend so much of their energy and their money and their time trying to create wedges between people. So let's just take schools for instance. The centerpiece of their agenda was this school voucher bill, which you probably heard about, which is basically taking money that would go to neighborhood public schools and sending that money to religious private schools. Those who are around Dunn and Wilkes say that their ultimate vision is to replace public schooling with religious schooling for everyone. That's what they're trying to get to. Yes.
Wow.
And so, but they know that Texans love their public schools, right? Like, I mean, public education is enshrined in our state's constitution. Friday night lights in a lot of these small towns, the school is not just an academic institution, it is the community hub that brings people together. So if Dunn and Wilkes want to get rid of public education, which I think they do, and I think the journalism bears this out, they've got to drive a wedge between people in their public school community. And so they deliberately fund a lot of the book stuff, a lot of the cultural stuff, the craziness at school boards. A lot of that is kind of funded and organized through the Dunn and Wilkes empire. Of course, people should go to the school board if they have an authentic problem with the school district, which that happens a lot. But when you actually look into when you follow the money about who's getting the people to show up, who is distributing the information, who is riling people up about some of this stuff and undermining trust in public education, it's often Dunn and Wilkes, and it is in pursuit of this policy goal, which is to defund and close neighborhood schools. And we've already seen.
Yeah, and they're making huge, unfortunate strides on that in Texas. And we've talked about before the voucher and how it can be sold really nicely. We're just going to support your ability to go to the school that you want to. But in effect, it does that same thing of disadvantaging further low-income folks, and then things will be fine for high-income folks. And those public schools that we should be focused on strengthening end up being even more. The ones that were already struggling end up struggling even more. And that's a part of a broader ideology from different people, but billionaires like the ones that he cited. Then Rogan asked him simply, why are you a Democrat? And his answer kind of gives some childhood background and stuff, but he gets to something that I think is fascinating.
Why are you a Democrat?
Well, my mother, so I told you I was born to a single mom. She was a preacher's daughter. From Laredo down on the border. She left home at 19. She moved up to Austin. She met my birth father, who was a high school dropout and had a drinking problem. And that drinking problem sometimes led to being violent with my mother. And there was one night, it was me and mom and my birth father, and he had too much drink and got violent again. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And my mom decided right then and there that she was leaving. So she packed all our stuff. She put me in her little Ford Escort. She drove me to the hotel where she worked downtown. The manager let us stay in one of the rooms for a few weeks until we found a little apartment in East Austin. And mom, she took on double duty at the hotel. She fought for me at every instance, even when it was her own physical safety was at risk. And back then, this was early 90s, she could look over at the Texas Capitol and she saw Texas Democrats like Ann Richards, Bob Bullock, people who fought for the little guy, for working people who were forgotten and left behind. That was the classic Democratic Party.
Right.
And so I remember when I guess I was maybe kindergarten, and someone in school, they were talking about political parties, and I asked my mom what we were, and she was like, we're Democrats because Democrats fight for the people. That was what she said. And my mom is still a Democrat today, but I don't know how much our party is still true to that. But I do know that that's our historical legacy, is the party that fights for for the little guy. And I think we're at our best when we do that today. We're at our worst when we stray from that.
I would agree with that.
So
Yeah, so imagine you're playing golf and you know when the ball gets really close to the hole and then you just got one shot yet left and you're gonna win or something. You're gonna have achieved the golf. You're gonna yell golf, or however, you know. And then you go to the hole and you kind of get a little careless and you're like, and you miss it and you're like, oh. I'm afraid Democrats are gonna do that. But they have a really easy, I'll change my metaphor, layup, right? Or go back to golf, they can just, if they'll just focus and just boom. Right now, there was a lot of bubbling anti-Trump, anti-MAGA, confused about where people stand then if they swung that direction, but they're still mad Democrats. And if the Democratic Party, yes, in the presidential race once that comes around, but just in the midterms, in these House races, Senate races, if they can just get back to the basics, get back to a practical and consequential, like really stuff that feels like it's going to move the needle, economic policies and messaging around that, people want it. And often you say, okay, but if you just lay out policies kind of blandly, does that really compel people? The right is so good about not really having that great policy, sometimes disastrous policies, but something about the way they rile up these culture wars and get everybody freaking out about bathrooms and trans and whatever, that you need something more salacious like that. But I'm telling you, the salacious thing that grabs people's attention right now, it's going to be their opposition to what they're seeing in their lives because of Republicans. They pushed through such a terrible bill. People are going to feel that, along with the other action of the Trump administration. It's there. You don't need to invent some culture war or something and then just say, hey, here's the alternative. We're keeping it simple. Here are the top policies we're pushing to improve your lives, and we're advocating for working class Americans, and Trump has screwed you over. And a small, powerful few have screwed you over. People want it. They want to grab it. Just hand it to them. Dang it. And I'm worried the fear of messing things up will almost cause Democrats to be afraid to change. No, we just have to beat this MAGA Republican Party, so we're just going to still be too much pro status quo, right? Any of that just needs a whack. And James Talarico's making a great point, which is you have a lot of really incredible historic achievements in the Democratic Party's history. So if they can bring that energy, people want the alternative. And it is good to see Talarico going on Rogan. That's a little cue for our next story. But if you're watching this in YouTube segments, that's something else. Share your thoughts in the comments.